are helping pharmacists have the role they need to make the impact that the world really, really needs right now. And for that, I'm also very thankful. And many, if not all of you, are wearing tons of different hats right now. And there's things going on in your lives that I have no idea about. I just share and say, I know that there are challenges and moments of joy in all of our lives right now. And I talk about self-care, both in the context of today and also just in general for always. I hope the value and implementation of self-care, which we get to define ourselves, which we get to give to ourselves in our very own, very unique ways, transcends all the real obstacles we might be facing now. I only have a quick 15 minutes, and honestly, each one of these slides that I'm talking about could be a presentation in and of itself. So really what I want to do is just highlight the what and why of self-care, specifically thinking about it in the terms of the time that we're living in now. It's very, very stressful. And all of us have different stressors, and we all respond differently to these stressors. But we know that there's lots of literature out there that tells us of both acute and chronic stress. And many of us may be seeing this happening to ourselves, happening to the ones that we love, the impact it's having on our, the way we're eating, maybe increasing alcohol or other substance use. If there's underlying mental or health conditions, how those are being impacted. And then the meanwhile, we have changes in responsibilities. I wish I was actually in person, right? So I could ask you how many of you are having to not only be, an employee or an owner, but a parent, having to relearn things like algebra or calculus, trying to be a teacher, trying to be a daycare provider, trying to be a cook. Like, our responsibilities are adding and adding and adding up, especially now. And there's a change in access, right? We don't have the same things that we were able to have right before all this started. There's a change in resources. Some of us don't have the same jobs or the same pay that we may have had, or other people that we know are impacted by it. And so, especially now, we have to remember that at the foundation,
In the room or something, B? Yeah.
it's you. And family, friends, work, responsibilities, that orange triangle part changes for all of us. We have our own unique circumstances and life experiences. And we tend to give and give and give to those instead of giving to ourselves as well. And that really hurts our foundation. And so to think about that as I talk about what self-care is and how we can maybe add to ourselves by implementing some of these self-care types of strategies. You may have seen the article that just came out, how there's a recent increase in medications being prescribed for anxiety and depression. And it's really important that we check in ourselves. The next slide's gonna go through 5 to 10 questions that I'm not gonna say out loud, all of them, but later, I think these slides will be posted. Just look at them and check in with yourself, because these are questions we ask our patients, but do we really ask ourselves these? And when we look up, how to take care of ourselves during COVID, a lot of things it'll tell you to do is decrease the amount of social media and news that you're listening to, start eating healthy, have a routine, etc. And yes, all of that's important. And those are some strategies that I am going to go through. But we really need to know as individuals what's bothering us the most, what's inducing stress, and what is our response to that stress. And so here are some of the questions, right? How are you impacted? What does your day-to-day look like? Do you feel in control? How are things out of your control impacting you? Who are you taking care of, and how are you managing that? And as you think about this and you check in with yourself, just be truly honest with yourself, so then you can figure out what the next thing to do is. Maybe you'll implement some of the self-care strategies that we talked about, or maybe for you, you may need to contact somebody, family, friend, healthcare providers, whoever it is, if you are having any of these or noticing somebody in your life having any of this feeling of hopelessness or difficulty managing emotions. So I just wanted to let you know that these are really real times, and people are really experiencing a lot of these emotions, and we're not immune to them. So just really do check in and be honest with yourself. My next part is, what is your why for self-care? Um, some of this information that I'm going to be talking about actually comes from the leadership world and how businesses work and how businesses can be more successful if they're thinking not just about what they're doing or the product that they're giving or how they're delivering that product, but the why behind that product. And at the end, I have some resources and some TED Talks and things that do talk about some of this stuff. It's really imperative that we know our why. We all know behavior change is challenging, right? Any sort of behavior change that we're trying to make. And intrinsic motivation, like the motivation that comes within ourselves, is a driving or desire to change. And that's really key. The extrinsic motivators help, setting alarms, having our friends check in with us, but it's that intrinsic motivation that really, really matters. And if I ask you, why do you want to make this behavior change? Why do you want to implement self-care in your life? We look at the evidence, we think about reasons, and it might be to prevent burnout or refocus or reduce that negative effect of stress. And yes, all of these are reasons, but more than the actual why, these are more results. And so the story I want to share is mindfulness. Mindfulness has probably the most evidence behind it. There's been studies, a plethora of studies that looked at how mindfulness impacts patients, how mindfulness impacts healthcare professionals. And I mean, you have all these reasons that I have on the slide for you. Me personally, I learned about it maybe about 8-9 years ago. I took a course. It was an 8-week course on mindfulness-based stress reduction. And honestly, I'm embarrassed saying this, but I really didn't like it. And I knew that it was important and I knew that it had benefits, but I just couldn't get myself to embrace it. And I don't know, without having my why to practice it, it made it very difficult. But there's a couple of things that I got from it. And the biggest lesson that I got from it was being present, specifically in the context with my children. And that was honestly, may seem like I'm exaggerating, but it was life-changing for me. We're all very busy. We're all wearing lots of hats. We're all doing a million things. And so it's very easy for me personally to get lost and let all parts of my life kind of flow together. And I realized I was doing that at home with my kids too. And so I just took that practice I learned and just implemented it into this one small, huge part of my life, my children. And what I saw was that my why for it grew stronger. And I was able to practice it because I understood what my why was. And even though I was only doing it in the context of that at that time, it actually made me follow the practice day in and day out. And now I do actually have a why that's expanded a little bit more. And I do a couple of meditations a couple of times a week. I'm still not embracing it the way I'd like to. But as that why grows and the results that I'm getting from it grows, I find it more enjoyable to practice and I find it more easier for me to implement and practice it. So what else does self-care look like? The pillars: nutrition, exercise, sleeping, right? You all know all this. You probably could write a book on this. You talk to your patients about this. We know that each one of these pillars has effectiveness behind it. And for us following any of these pillars or implementing any changes related to these pillars, our own experiences probably speak so much more louder than anything we could read in a journal, right? If we Google self-care, you're going to see tons of images. Take some deep breaths, drink a glass of water, do some stretches, play silly games, go for a walk, buy yourself a small gift, right? It's important. You can't pour from an empty cup. You're going to see lots of sayings around it. You're going to see lots of examples. The one thing, and I'm really trying not to be preachy as I talk about self-care because I know that we all have to embrace it in our own ways, in our own time. But one thing that I do ask of you is not to make self-care synonymous with self-indulgence. Indulgence means participating in an activity that, maybe makes us happy, but usually the connotation is that such activity is something that others would disapprove of. And self-care is not something that anybody should disapprove of. And you especially should not disapprove of that self-care that you're implementing into your life. So, when you spend 30 minutes reconnecting with your friends on Zoom, like maybe you have your old college friends get together and all you do is laugh and exchange stories about back when you were, 18 or 22. I promise. Um, don't feel guilty. Don't think about that laundry or the dishes or anything, because that all is going to still be there. And then when you go to tackle it, you'll go to tackle it in a much better place than if you had just skipped um, talking to your friends in the first place. Me personally, there's this Danish concept called hygge. It's Hygge, and it's this feeling of cozy. And so while, yes, I exercise and I try to eat healthy and I try to get enough sleep and I do embrace those pillars, a lot of my self-care comes from when I learned this. This was it. This is what I embrace. I'm making the slide using rainbow colors, turning on the fireplace, having a soft, cozy blanket. I invested in a Papazon during this time because we're home all the time just to sit and read a good book. Like that brings me peace and joy, and that allows me to then just be a better person in every other context of my life. Please don't make it another to-do. I know it may seem like that's what it is. It's like, I have to, do A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and now I also need to take care of myself, or now I need to figure out how to add 4 more things to my day when I don't even have time for the 4 things that I'm doing up, or the 4 million things that I'm doing already. If we think of it that way, it's going to be very hard to implement. And so really think of it more as recharging your own battery, and think of it as your foundation and as something that's very necessary, and plan for it. All of you are so very successful. You've done so many things in your lives. And I'm sure, once again, just like I said, you can write a book on what we know is best for our health. You can also write a book on what we need to do to implement these changes, right? But knowing is only half the battle. And so this slide talks about some of those pillars we talked about: getting enough sleep for our body, the exercise, even if it looks just as increasing your activity, standing for a part of the time that you're at your computer, or walking and taking a meeting that you don't need to be at your computer outside on the phone, or, going for a jog or a bike ride as the days get nicer. Nutrition, respecting your emotions, listening to your body. All of this, right? We just know that we're feeding our mind, body, and soul by practicing this. Another way that I implement is something I learned more recently, and it's this principle of setting intentions. And so it's this whole if then. So these are some of the personal ones that I'm sharing for me. One of the things is I need to start drinking more water. And so before I was doing this, every night I'm like, all right, I'm going to start drinking water first thing in the morning. And as soon as I get out of bed, what do? I go to my espresso machine, turn it on, and start with, yes, 4 shots of espresso. I know, it's crazy. But I don't know. I started writing and leaving a Post-it. And then I was like, that's not working because I'm not reading it. And so then I started leaving a water bottle next to my bed. And that changed everything. Or if it's after dinner, we'll go on a family walk. That's something we just started, since we've been home. And it's so easy for the whole day to, like, you're with your kids, but you're also working and you're also trying to cook, and there's all these things that meld together. And so while you think you're spending, or while I think I'm spending so much time with everybody, in reality, I'm not focused. And so we started this family walk after we eat. And it was hard because, like, the dishes need to be done, the food needs to be put away. And just decided, you know what, if it's after dinner, we are going to get up and we're going to go outside. And it's been so fun. It makes us move after we've eaten or overeaten sometimes. And we're silly. Nobody's really out there at that time at like 7:30. And so we're hopping and skipping and listening to music and singing, and it brings so much joy. And that works for us. Like, when I give you these examples, or just to show how I implement it, and some of this may work for you and some of it will be your own very unique ways. And then a template. I know, seems like homework, and maybe it is. But we all know that to help with accountability, writing things down is key. Sharing it with somebody, and then giving ourselves tangible reminders, and planning for potential barriers. Some of you may have seen this when you're helping patients with smoking cessation, right? The barriers exist. They're going to go out with their friends who are also smoking. So what do they do when that happens? Same thing. We're going to have our barriers to whatever self-care intention we set for ourselves, right? And so I gave examples of my increasing water or going on walks with my family. Other things, like with my friends, there's times where I'm like, how did a month go and we haven't even spoken to each other? And so I realized my barriers are that the evenings get busy. And so I started adding it on my calendar, and that changed everything. And then I was able to actually hold myself and my friends accountable for us getting together and having a conversation. And it was great. And I didn't really miss out on anything within my family life either. It just added to my day rather than it feeling like another thing to do. So those are just some ways that you can think about self-care as you incorporate into your life. I truly wish you the best on your self-care journey. It may look different right now because times are very different right now, and your self-care needs may evolve over time. And that's great. We are evolving over time. And so, of course, what we want to do and what we need to do is going to change as well. The only other thing I ask is just be patient and be kind with yourself as you're figuring out how to add this joy and kindness to yourself, mind, body, and soul. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Neha. Great presentation. Does anyone have any questions? You can type your questions, or if you hit participant, you can also hit the button to raise your hand. All right, well, we'll switch over to the rest of the town hall. Thank you very much. And we do have, I will go ahead and give you the code here. And so I'm going to pause the recording.